President Trump declares a national emergency, securing billions of dollars for a southern border wall.
I went through Congress. I made a deal. I got almost $1.4 billion when I wasn't supposed to get $1. Not $1. He's not going to get $1. Well, I got $1.4 billion, but I'm not happy with it.
Where the money will be directed and a live report from the San Ysidro port of entry. The winter storm has died down, but a new low-pressure system is pushing in and set to bring more rain. We have your weekend weather forecast coming up. And Black Comics Day is returning for a second year in a row. We'll show you what to expect for the premiere tomorrow. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. President Trump declares a national emergency to fund a southern border wall.
So we're going to be signing today and registering national emergency.
To avert another government shutdown, Congress and President Trump agreed to allocate $1.4 billion for 55 miles of fencing on the border. Today, President Trump signed a national emergency declaration to receive around $8 billion additional dollars for border security. At a press conference in the Rose Garden today, the president defended his position.
Well, I got $1.4 billion, but I'm not happy with it. I also got billions and billions of dollars for other things. Port of entries, lots of different things. The purchase of drug equipment, more than we were even requesting. In fact, the primary fight was on the wall. Everything else, we have so much, as I said, I don't know what to do with it. We have so much money. But on the wall, they skimped. So I was successful in that sense, but I want to do it faster. I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster.
Part of the emergency funding will come from the military. Now, San Diego officials are trying to figure out the impact on millions of dollars of projected earmarks for local Navy and Marine bases. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh explains what's being planned.
The big projects potentially on the chopping block include work to bring the F-35 jet fighter to Miramar, a new pier at 32nd Street, and a new water treatment project at Camp Pendleton. In fact, there are hundreds of smaller military construction projects slated to get underway in 2019 in the San Diego region. Camp Pendleton alone is slated for 42 projects. Add up all of them, and they're worth as much as $219 million, according to numbers from Naval Facilities Southwest. Miramar is slated to receive the new F-35. $64 million worth of projects were expected to be green-lighted there this year. The administration wants to cut $3.6 billion from military construction to build the wall. Mark Balmert heads the San Diego Military Advisory Council and says no one locally knows where the money will come from.
Yet to be determined how much of it will be felt here in San Diego, but it's a big number. So I think the Marines and Navy here in town, they're looking to D.C., to the Department of Defense, to hear what the strategy will be.
With the number of facilities in San Diego County, the potential projects run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. In announcing that California is suing the Trump administration, Governor Gavin Newsom says he expects the president's plan will also impact money going to drug interdiction in the state, including the National Guard.
No other state will be more harmed than the state of California because of the magnitude of the money. We're also looking at potentially the impact of our National Guard deployment, including that deployment that I announced, the redeployment, just a week ago.
The full impact is not expected to be known until the decision is made by the Secretary of Defense. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
As Steve mentioned, California is likely to sue the Trump administration over the emergency declaration. State Attorney General Javier Becerra came out with Governor Newsom today to say there is no emergency at the border, and President Trump does not have the authority to make that declaration.
No one in America is above the law. not even the President of the United States. The President does not have power to act frivolously, taking the powers of this 240-plus year democracy and using them in ways that were never intended. He has the power to declare a national emergency, but this is not 9/11. This is not the Iran hostage crisis of 1979. This is a president showing his disdain for the rule of law and our U.S. Constitution.
Becerra has filed at least 45 lawsuits against the Trump administration. San Diego has the busiest port of entry in the U.S., the San Ysidro Port of Entry. KPBS border reporter Jean Guerrero is live there now with reaction to the declaration. Jean.
Hey, Ebony. So as local immigrant rights groups like Alliance San Diego say that the National Emergency Declaration is a slippery slope towards authoritarianism, using unprecedented emergency powers to bypass the will of Congress, I came down to the San Ysidro Port of Entry to talk to people who cross the border on a daily basis to see what they think about the idea of an emergency at the border. Most of them said that they don't think that there's an emergency, but that President Trump's rhetoric around the immigration issue is creating a lot of problems. It's slowing down cross-border commerce and making them more reluctant to cross the border to do what they do on a regular basis. Here's some of those people.
I mean, just with the talk of, the rapists and murders and all this stuff, there are visibly less people on the street in San Ysidro in our commercial district.
We cross the border constantly. There's no emergency. The emergency is created only by him.
It's just a waste of money. Make it as high as they want, like he wants to, They're gonna make it one way or the other,
I also spoke to people here at the Port of Entry who thought the opposite, who were in favor of the National Emergency Declaration and said that we really need a wall to fortify border security. Here are some of those people.
It's all about the money. It's not about the people. We don't hate nobody, but you can't take my job.
We do need the wall. Like every house should have some kind of barrier against, outsiders.
There's currently a resolution in Congress that will be voted on by the end of the month to potentially stop the National Emergency Declaration from going forward. Reporting from the border, Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
And Jean, one more thing. You mentioned a slippery slope. Did anyone you spoke to today expand on what exactly they meant by the slippery slope?
Yeah, so I spoke to Andrea Guerrero at Alliance San Diego, and she was basically saying that if the president can invoke these executive powers to address what he calls an emergency when there's real dispute as to whether there is an emergency, he might end up using that same authority to, for example, address the alleged voter fraud that he says is an issue by sending, for example, military resources to polling places. So there's just some concerns about what this could eventually lead to in terms of him using these same powers to address other, what they call fake emergencies or fake crises.
Thanks, Jean.
Back to you.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump declares a national emergency to get more money for a border wall. Democrats vow to fight the move. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A riot breaks out at Donovan Correctional Facility, leaving 10 inmates injured. Around 9 this morning, nearly 50 men began fighting in the yard. Guards ordered them to stop, but eventually used pepper spray. One inmate was seriously injured and airlifted to a hospital. No guards were hurt. It's unclear what started the brawl. Several San Diego police unions are suing to keep officer misconduct records private, even though a new state law says they should be public. KPBS reporter Taryn Minto says media outlets are fighting back, and a ruling today was in their favor.
KPBS and other media outlets were granted permission to intervene in the case and argue in favor of releasing the records. A judge will review all arguments and is expected to rule on March 1st whether the documents should be released. Multiple outlets requested the documents, and the right to intervene is a small step toward bringing them to light. 8 police unions sued their departments to block release of the records. They argue a new transparency law that went into effect January 1st shouldn't apply to cases that happened before 2019. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
So we're back now for our Friday business report, and we're joined with Miro Kopik from SDSU and Bottom Line Marketing to talk about this week's business news. And one of the biggest stories comes from Amazon. The company has announced that it's actually pulling out of plans to build a headquarters in New York City. And one of the reasons cited was lack of cooperation with some of the local lawmakers. So can you expand on what the backlash was all about regarding this plan that would have brought in 25,000 jobs to the area?
Yeah, it was an interesting dynamic, and this goes back to the kind of the balance between corporate welfare and corporate greed, and how public domains are trying to deal with it. So you can deal with stadiums, and people are very used to that here in San Diego. But in New York City, the deal was made for this $3 billion investment or incentives between the mayor and the governor. Locally, the unions, the city council, and local organizers weren't heavily consulted. So they felt that for Long Island City, it would create a lot of distress in terms of increased housing costs. There wasn't enough considered in terms of transportation, schools, and a lot of issues. And then they were extraordinarily vocal, to the point where it was a big surprise to Amazon, because Amazon's thinking, I'm bringing in 25,000 jobs. There's going to be ancillary jobs that are created. I'm going to bring in tax revenues, and I'm getting this punch in the face by the city. And for $3 billion, though, it's a major issue. And one of the criticisms that the local politicians said is that you can direct that money to bring in more teachers, to improve the infrastructure. That's a big deal.
So moving on now to another major retailer, Target. There's talks to bring a mini Target to UC San Diego. Can you tell us how this might fit into the university's long-term future goals?
You know, the university is making a concerted effort to going from a commuter school to a residential school. They're building a lot of new dorm space, and to accommodate the number of people living on campus, they need to provide better shopping, entertainment, and dining opportunities. This Target takes the space in the Price Center, which is where the current bookstore is. It's going to be a 35,000 square foot location. It's going to cater to student needs, you know, grab and go meals, dorm essentials. So the merchandising in the store is going to be really different. Target's very interesting in this because it's a win-win for both the university and Target. Target has over 20 of these concepts around the country at different colleges and universities like USC, Penn State, University of Florida. And what they're doing, and what's an interesting strategy for Target versus, say, a Walmart, is they're really tapping into these young consumers who haven't made their brand choices and brand preferences yet, and they're making that Target experience one that they're going to take with them whenever they leave the university and settle wherever they are. So Target will be the place they're going to go shop.
So here in San Diego and across the nation, some people are actually struggling to pay their car notes, which, of course, is one of the biggest expenses a lot of people have outside of their mortgage and their rent. But what does it say about the economy that people are falling so far behind?
You know, this is a really unsettling issue. So, as you're saying, there's 7 million Americans who are 90 days or more delinquent on their car loans. And these consumers are consumers with lower credit ratings. They're younger consumers, so a lot of them are under 30, so they're carrying college or loans as well as the car loans. And what's scary, and we talked about payday lending last week, a lot of these consumers are paying 2 to 3 times the interest rate on their car loans versus someone with a good credit rating. So this can have major issue for auto lenders and also for credit card companies, because people may use their credit card to kind of pay for some of these loans. And at the lower end of the economic spectrum, this can really portend big issues, especially in an economy that's growing, low unemployment. These people don't have a lot of options.
So it sounds like a serious concern that we will be following. Thank you so much for sorting it all out for us.
Thanks, Ebony.
I reached out to Target representatives who tell me the UC San Diego mini Target is not a done deal, adding San Diego is just one market being considered for expansion. The Malcolm X Library hosted San Diego's first ever Black Comics Day last year, and tomorrow the event returns. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando is here with a preview.
I'm here at the Malcolm X Library, site of Black Comics Day, and I'm going to go inside and speak with event organizer Keithan Jones. Keithan, you launched Black Comics Day last year. What was that like?
Very exciting. We had a great turnout. Folks have been telling me all year long how much of a good time they had, and they can't wait to experience it again.
And what can someone coming to Black Comics Day expect?
They can expect to meet professional comic book creators, particularly Black creators, and have them in one spot where it's easy, where they're accessible, where folks can come and meet these folks and see that, yes, we do actually work on these properties, these famous properties, because not only do they create their own characters that represent them and represent the culture, they also work on the mainstream stuff. They work on Spider-Man, they work on Batman, they work on the Hulk, and so on and so forth. But when they're not working on those mainstream projects, they have their own IPs, their own intellectual properties that are characters of color. But they don't necessarily have the venue to display this stuff. You can come and meet them, talk with them, see their books, read their books, buy their books. And if you're an aspiring young artist yourself, I would suggest you bring your work and we'll actually take a look at it, and who knows where that will lead.
Keithan, this is a very personal thing for you because you yourself are a comic book creator.
Yes, I've been creating comics since I was 11 years old. I actually created a book called The Power Knights, which is right here, actually. And I created this because I didn't necessarily see characters that represented me. So I was like, what if I go ahead and do this myself and create a venue where other people who feel the same way as I do can come and display their work. And so that's what Black Comics Book Day is about, essentially. Just it's a way for African-American artists and writers out there to have a venue to display work that would not otherwise have the opportunity or the venues to have that platform.
You've added something new this year, and that's video gaming. What's that about?
Well, we thought it'd be fun to add that element to the show, seeing that comics and video games work hand in hand. They share the same concepts and the same creative force that put those genres together. So we just thought it'd be a good way to spice up the show, so to speak.
And we have the person who's going to be organizing the video gaming part of Black Comics Day, and that's Dane Henderson. So what can people expect from the video gaming aspect?
It's exciting. I mean, for the people who know video games, it outgrossed the movie industry last year. So what we're going to bring is an opportunity to see some of the VR games, including somebody from the Black Eyed Peas, which is will.i.am, and show a VR headset from a Black video game perspective, as well as other games, fighting games and things for people to have a chance and opportunity to win some prizes.
And what role do you play in video gaming?
I like video games. I'm that baby nerd. I was on my Commodore VIC-20 and 64 back in the day, so I definitely understood the gaming and kind of nerdy. But now that nerdness has grown, just like the comics. And so I think tying those elements in with the graphics, with the artist and artistry will help enhance the Black Comic Day.
And why do you think it's important to include video games in a Black Comics Day?
Because there's not a lot of blacks in computer science. So one of my friends, Rob Gatson, who's the AI programmer for 2K Basketball, there's not a lot of us doing that. So I want to make sure that we're working with Yes We Code and other programs to make sure that we don't fall behind in certain communities learning programming and computer science.
All right. Malcolm X Library is going to be the site for Black Comics Day tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., so come and check it out.
Well, we didn't get much rain this morning and afternoon throughout the county compared to the record-setting rainfall from yesterday. But that will change this weekend. Meteorologist Dajia Swad has tonight's forecast.
Unsettled conditions continue across much of the Southwest. As we recap here in San Diego County, the last 2 days, what you're looking at for our rainfall totals, and these reports are from earlier this morning. Palomar Observatory, 10.94 inches of rain, shattering a record that was set in 1901. We also got lots of rain in Birch Hill, as well as in the Oceanside, 3.44 inches of rain reported there, and at the San Diego International Airport, over an inch of rain. That wet weather once again and continues into tonight across much of California. And in fact, we'll continue to see that drop into our area through tonight. Rain and drizzle for San Diego with a low 51. We'll also see that wet weather into Oceanside with a low of 46. Also dropping down into the upper 40s for Borrego Springs and cooling down to 32 and Mount Laguna. In fact, Mount Laguna, we're dealing with windy conditions. High wind advisory in place into the mountains, extending back into Big Bear Lake, and that expires Saturday at 4 a.m. Now your futurecast going to show this moisture dropping in from the north, 6 p.m. into 9 o'clock, wet here for San Diego County. And that's not it. We'll continue to get another round of energy pressing in this moisture for Oceanside, San Diego, and Mount Laguna into the overnight hours, but really into your Saturday, drying on out here and allowing for some sunshine to be seen. Don't get me wrong, still chilly and still unsettled across much of the southwest, but we happen to be in that little dry zone, dry bubble with clouds into Borrego Springs, a high of 64 for Saturday. 37 in Mount Laguna and 61 in San Diego. Early week still going to be a bit chilly, but starting to dry out a tad bit more. Now, we're dry for your Saturday here at the coast, but still a chance for some afternoon rain with a high of 57. Cool into your Monday with partly sunny skies. Also going to see that same trend, afternoon rain inland with a high of 55 for your Sunday. And in the mountains, better chance to see those snow levels drop to about 3,000 to 4,000 feet. That means some accumulation running up to 2 inches in most locations. Very cold air sticking with us. Highs in the 30s with lows potentially dropping into the teens some nights. For the deserts for the next several days, we're looking dry for Saturday and then some rain potentially on your Sunday afternoon. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your AccuWeather meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
The Scripps Institution of Oceanography is mourning the death of a scientist who was instrumental in building the region's research community. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson takes a look back at his life.
Gustav Arrhenius came to Scripps in the 1950s, and he helped Roger Revelle and others shape the region's scientific future. Arrhenius pioneered research into deep-sea sedimentation, and he and his colleagues expanded the boundaries in the field of geochemistry. His son Thomas says his father also influenced the future of one of the region's top college campuses.
What he would point to was the fact that he had done so many different things. He was a man who had really broad interests, and he didn't stay focused on one particular thing for his entire career. Instead, he dabbled in many different areas. Really, I think that's what he enjoyed doing the most.
Arrhenius was one of the key scientists that analyzed lunar samples that were brought to Earth by the Apollo space missions. He published more than 150 papers and books. Arrhenius was 96. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
A new warning over how San Diego will confront climate change, the decision to halt the Plaza de Panama project, and a new legal fight over asylum seekers in San Diego. Join us for the KPBS Roundtable tonight at 8:30.
The human-animal connection has long been known for its healing qualities. Usually it involves working with cats or dogs to treat mental and physical health issues. But now, as WGBH News reporter Christina Quinn explains, there's another animal gaining favor in the therapy world.
Good job, Memphis.
It's only his 4th visit to the farm, but 8-year-old Memphis Rose looks like an old pro interacting with donkeys Pumpkin and Jack. Memphis started coming to Cultivate Care Farms in Bolton as part of a treatment plan for his autism. He says when he's here, he feels calm and happy.
What is it that makes you happy being out here?
It's just that the animals are covered in fur, and when you pet them, they feel soft.
They're soft, they're cute, and it turns out donkeys in particular can help people with autism learn how to read social cues.
So now you can pet them, right? Because they're close?
Unlike horses, donkeys haven't been bred to interact with humans for centuries. There's a lot of attitude in these little burros, and this is what site director Megan Moran says makes them special. They're small but feral, approachable but not easily charmed.
Their needs are pretty basic and concrete, so you can get a lot of cause and effect, which is really helpful, especially when clients are then needing to figure out how to navigate the real world.
And the real world can be tough for a kid with autism. Memphis's mom, Paula, says before coming to Cultivate Farms, he struggled with the long school day.
He would come home from school
very anxious and angry and just, you know, go to his room and scream because what's happening in school is all those feelings and those anxieties are being like repressed.
But since he started hanging out with Megan, Pumpkin, and Jack a few weeks ago, the daily meltdowns have tapered off to maybe 1 or 2 a week.
I think it's easier for him to come and talk to Megan because he sees her almost like a friend. And this is like a very laid-back place, more than just going to an office and talking to a doctor.
That's part of the idea behind the Care Farm approach, taking therapy out of the clinical setting.
We can really try out situations where what would you do in this type of conflict, or how can you socialize or spend time in another person's space, like what is appropriate.
Founder and executive director Andrew Lappin says what takes months in an office setting takes only weeks here.
I think it's important that we consider donkeys more in treatment, that we have put this huge emphasis on horses and as these beautiful and majestic creatures, which they are, and there's a lot of humans that don't identify as beautiful or majestic. But with a donkey, you catch just about everyone.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. And we're leaving you tonight with a tango performance by a new production premiering tonight at the San Diego Ballet. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.